Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear could become one of the most consequential turning points in the modern history of relations between Canada and the United States. Over the past 24 hours, a moment has unfolded that breaks sharply from decades of diplomatic habit and political caution. For the first time in recent memory, a Canadian Prime Minister has drawn a clear line in the sand and refused to bend under mounting pressure from Washington Prime Minister Mark Carney, has delivered a message that is simple, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. The answer is no. No more one-sided concessions, no more agreements shaped entirely by American priorities, no more reacting to policies dictated from the White House without meaningful negotiation. This is not just a soundbite or a fleeting political moment. It is a signal that Canada may be recalibrating its entire approach to its most important economic and political relationship. By the time we reach the end of this discussion, you will understand why this moment matters so deeply, how it could reshape the economic landscape of North America, and why the long-anticipated July 1 deadline may no longer carry the weight it once did. Let's begin in Ottawa. On Parliament Hill, it's a Wednesday morning. Cameras are set up, reporters are gathered, and anticipation is high. Mark Carney walks toward a meeting with members of his party. And the press immediately focuses on a single question. Is Canada prepared to make further concessions in order to restart negotiations with the United States? Carney's response is notable not because it is loud or confrontational, but because it is calm, controlled, and firm. He does not deflect. He does not soften his language. Instead, he makes it clear that negotiations must be a two-way process, not something imposed by one side. He emphasizes that any outcome must be mutually beneficial. And perhaps most importantly, that Canada is willing to take the time necessary to reach the right agreement. That phrase, "we will take the time," represents a fundamental shift in tone. For years, Canadian leaders have often approached trade talks with a sense of urgency, aware of how dependent the country is on access to the American market. But this time, there is no urgency in Carney's words. There is no sense of rushing toward a deal at any cost. Instead, there is patience, and with it, a quiet confidence. So what changed, the turning point, appears to stem from a report that revealed a new demand from the United States Canada would need to make concessions before formal negotiations could even begin. According to multiple sources within the Canadian government, Washington is effectively asking for upfront commitments, what some officials have described as an entry cost before any serious discussions take place. This idea may sound unusual, but it aligns with a broader negotiating approach that has been used before. In early 2025, a senior American official described trade negotiations in terms of a membership model. You have to pay first in order to gain access. At the time, the comparison was widely dismissed as rhetorical flair. Now, however, it appears that this concept has become a guiding principle. From the Canadian perspective, this approach has created deep frustration. Officials feel that even when concessions are made, they are not met with reciprocal action. Instead, additional demands follow, creating a cycle in which Canada gives ground without seeing tangible results. Canada has already made significant concessions. Over the past year, the Canadian government has taken multiple steps aimed at easing tensions and demonstrating goodwill. It eliminated a digital services tax that had targeted major technology companies. It issued substantial refunds to those same firms. It also removed a range of retaliatory tariffs that had been imposed on American goods. These were not symbolic gestures. They carried real economic weight, amounting to billions of dollars in lost revenue. Yet, according to Canadian officials, these actions did not produce meaningful progress. Tariffs imposed by the United States on key Canadian industries remain firmly in place. Sectors such as steel, aluminum, lumber, and automotive manufacturing continue to face significant barriers. Behind the scenes, there is also a sense of lost opportunity. Negotiations last year reportedly came very close to producing a breakthrough agreement. The groundwork had been laid and both sides were nearing a resolution, but then a political development disrupted the process. A public communication strategy intended to influence opinion instead provoked a negative reaction from the American side, effectively derailing months of progress. Since that moment, the situation has only become more complicated. The list of American demands has expanded, covering a wide range of policies that extend beyond traditional trade issues. The United States is seeking changes to Canada's regulations governing digital platforms and streaming services. It is pushing for reforms in the agri-Indian forcing export, particularly in areas protect domestic producers. It is calling for adjustments to provincial policies. that influence how goods are purchased and which companies are prioritized for larger scale projects. It also wants improved access for American products that have been affected by recent trade tensions. Taken together, these requests represent a broad effort to reshape aspects of Canada's domestic policy landscape. From Canada's perspective, this raises concerns about sovereignty and the extent to which trade negotiations should influence internal decision-making. The disagreement is not just about specific policies. It reflects a deeper divergence in economic philosophy. American officials have framed the issue as a clash between two models, one that continues to embrace global integration and another that seeks to correct what it sees as the downsides of globalization. There is also an underlying warning: if Canada continues to strengthen economic relationships with other global partners, the United States may reconsider elements of the current trade framework. This could include changes to rules that determine how goods qualify for tariff-free access, potentially altering the foundation of North American trade. All of this brings us to the July 1 review deadline. Under the existing trade agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, a formal review is required in 2026. This review was intended to provide an opportunity to assess the agreement and decide whether to extend it, modify it, or move toward a different arrangement. For months, this deadline has been treated as a critical moment, but now both Canadian and American officials have acknowledged that a comprehensive agreement will not be reached in time. The deadline, once seen as a focal point, has effectively lost its significance. The process will continue beyond that date, with procedural steps extending the timeline. The agreement itself remains in place, and most trade continues to flow under its existing terms. Meanwhile, another development is unfolding that could have significant implications. The United States has moved more quickly in its discussions with Mexico, beginning negotiations earlier and making measurable progress. This creates the possibility that the broader regional agreement could evolve into separate bilateral arrangements. If that happens, Canada could find itself in a more isolated position, negotiating independently, while other agreements move forward. So why is Canada choosing this moment to stand firm? The answer lies in a deliberate and long-term strategy. Mark Carney has been signaling for weeks that Canada needs to reassess its economic dependencies. In a recent national address, he spoke about how close ties with a single partner can create vulnerabilities as well as strengths, rather than rushing into a deal under pressure. Canada appears to be preparing for a gradual shift that includes expanding trade relationships with other regions, investing in domestic resilience, and reducing reliance on any one market. Canada is not negotiating from a position of immediate crisis. The existing agreement still covers the vast majority of trade, allowing goods to move with minimal barriers. While certain industries continue to face tariffs, the broader economic relationship remains intact. This provides Canada with time to explore alternatives, time to build new partnerships, and time to wait for external pressures to evolve. Those pressures are not limited to Canada. Within the United States, various industries are already feeling the effects of ongoing trade tensions. Farmers, manufacturers, and exporters who rely on access to Canadian markets are facing economic challenges. Over time, this could influence political dynamics. Balanced negotiation. However, this approach is not without risk. The United States has demonstrated a willingness to act quickly and decisively, often favoring immediate outcomes over prolonged negotiations. There is always the possibility of sudden policy changes or escalations that could increase economic pressure. Within Canada, critics have voiced concerns about the potential consequences of a prolonged standoff. Many industries depend heavily on the American market, and finding alternative markets is not a simple or immediate process. Diversification is a long-term goal, but it does not provide instant relief. There are also political considerations. Expectations were set earlier that a deal could be reached relatively quickly. As time passes without significant progress, pressure on the government is likely to grow. So where does this leave us?